Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are doing something really incredible. We're using advanced AI software to analyze 18th century paintings and engravings, literally stepping back nearly 300 years to experience the architecture, the bustling streets, and the very atmosphere of London exactly as Londoners once did. It's essentially a cinematic tour of a world that is both incredibly familiar to us, yet completely, utterly foreign. So let's dive right in. Over 500,000 people. To put that into perspective for the era, that sheer scale establishes Georgian London as way more than just a large town. It was a booming, chaotic metropolis. Right at this moment in history, London was aggressively transforming from a crowded medieval city into the beating heart of an emerging global superpower. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with a city of extremes, then move on to the architecture of royal grandeur, explore a fortress of dark history, look at the engines of global commerce, and wrap up with snapshots frozen in time. Section 1. A city of extremes. The beating heart of Georgian London. To really grasp the vibe of this beating heart, I want you to imagine an extraordinary bird's-eye view looking up the River Thames. The river was the city's main highway, just completely crowded with sailing ships and rowing boats, teeming with trade from all across the vast British Empire. And as you look up at the skyline, the massive contrast of the era is brilliantly illustrated. On one side, you have the medieval Old London Bridge, still heavily lined with these centuries-old houses and shops, exactly as it had been for generations. But then, on the exact same skyline, towering over the city, is Christopher Wren's magnificent St. Paul's Cathedral. Completed in 1710, it's standing right alongside the monument to the devastating 1666 Great Fire. It's literally the old medieval world existing right in the shadow of a grand, sweeping modern architectural vision. Moving on to Section 2, Architecture of Royal Grandeur, Projecting Power and Elegance. Now, shifting down to the south, looking northwest from the scientifically significant One Tree Hill in Greenwich Park, which, fun fact, is the future home of the Prime Meridian, notice this incredible concept of statement architecture at play. Just look at the grand colonnades of Greenwich Hospital down below. Completed in 1751 by master architects Christopher Wren and Nicholas Hawksmoor as a home for retired naval seamen, these Baroque masterpieces functioned as deliberate statement architecture. I mean, they were built explicitly to proclaim Britain's absolute dominance of the seas to anyone and everyone sailing up the river toward the capital. Zooming back into the West End, we hit Leicester Square. This area completely transformed from open farmland into a highly fashionable residential magnet. It was anchored by Leicester House, built in 1635, which later became home to Frederick, Prince of Wales. In 1753, an equestrian statue of King George I was erected right smack in the center. But what's truly fascinating here is the artistic magnetism of the square. The brilliant William Hogarth lived and worked at number 31, and Sir Joshua Reynolds established his highly influential portrait studio in number 47. It was an absolute hub for both royalty and artistic geniuses long before it eventually transitioned into the entertainment district we know today. Over in the aristocratic pinnacle of St. James's Square, where dukes, earls, and prime ministers lived right under the shadow of St. James's church spire, the reality wasn't always so pristine. Actually, the residents themselves famously described the area as rude and in great disorder. It was muddy, neglected, and frankly, pretty embarrassing for such a prestigious address. At least it was until royal gardener Charles Bridgeman stepped in with his 1720s transformation, adding an elegant 150-foot basin and 8 stone obelisks bearing lamps. Which brings us to Section 3, A Fortress of Dark History, the Tower of London. So the crucial point here is the sharp, jarring contrast we experience arriving at the south bank of the Thames, looking across at Britain's most formidable fortress. Tracing the 700-year timeline of power, we see how this massive stone complex, which brilliantly used the river as both a defensive moat and a bustling highway, completely controlled access to the city. It all began way back in 1078 with William the Conqueror's Norman keep, known as the White Tower, built using stone imported all the way from France. Fast forward through the execution of famous prisoners like Anne Boleyn and Thomas More in the 1500s, and by the 1700s, it's functioning as the ultimate unyielding symbol of Georgian royal power. But keep in mind, it wasn't just a fortress. This place served terrifying yet completely vital simultaneous roles. It operated as a royal palace, a military armory, the official mint, and the treasury for the crown jewels. And, of course, it was a grim, impenetrable prison where unfortunate figures arrived by barge directly from the Thames, passing straight through the infamous Traitor's Gate for execution.
All right, let's shift gears to Section 4, Engines of Global Commerce, Fueling a Superpower.
Leaving the royal palaces and grim prisons behind, we step into the highly energetic, chaotic spaces where London's merchant class was aggressively building their global empires. At the Royal Exchange, founded by Sir Thomas Gresham in 1565 and modeled on the Antwerp Bourse, just try to imagine the sensory experience of this magnificent open-air courtyard. First, you have twice-daily trading sessions strictly marked by the ringing of the bell in the tower above. Second, imagine the chaos of high-stakes deals being shouted out in dozens of languages. Add in the constant wrestle of lucrative bills of exchange. And finally, the rapid scratching of quills on high-stakes contracts. This building, housing luxury shops and Lloyd's of London Insurance in its galleries, was literally the prototype that would go on to inspire stock exchanges from New York to Hong Kong. And then you've got Cheapside. Taking its name from the Old English word for marketplace, you can think of it as the Oxford Street and Wall Street of the 1700s rolled into one. This incredibly wide avenue featured some of the world's absolute most expensive retail premises. It was the commercial artery of the city where merchants were making unimaginable fortunes selling silks, jewelry, rare books, and exotic spices. Rising high above all that chaotic wealth of Cheapside was Christopher Wren's architectural masterpiece, St. Mary Le Bow. And this actually brings us to the true definition of a Cockney. A true Cockney was anyone born within the sound of those famous Bow bells ringing from that very steeple. It literally defined what it meant to hold that proud local title amidst this rapidly expanding global hub. Finally, Section 5, Snapshots Frozen in Time, Reviving the Past. You know, history has left us thousands of these remarkable snapshots, these incredible paintings and engravings from cities all across the globe, just waiting to be brought back to life through the power of AI reconstruction. So as we conclude our explainer of this truly extreme 18th century metropolis, we really want to know, which city would you like to see revived next? If you could peel back the layers of time and walk the streets of any past civilization at the absolute height of its power,